I thought we were in this together. That single thought kept echoing in my mind the night I discovered the truth, like a judge's gavel slamming down, sentencing me in a courtroom I didn't even know I was attending. The day had been long and draining. Endless Zoom meetings, half-answered emails, spreadsheets, and strategies for products no one would remember in a year. I came home later than I wanted. Again, it seemed like our house had grown still, as if it were hiding from me. At first, I chalked it up to exhaustion. Then I felt that something was off. The living room light was on, but I couldn't hear Evelyn's usual background chatter. She never liked silence. She was always on the phone, or singing softly, or flipping through a design magazine. But that evening, nothing. Just a soft hush that felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. I climbed the stairs, calling her name in a calm, even tone. I always tried to remain composed, especially after a stressful day. When she answered, her voice came from behind the bedroom door, muffled but suspiciously breathless. "I'm fine," she said. I paused, resting my hand on the doorknob, my heart stumbling in my chest. I didn't push it open. I figured maybe she was upset about something and needed space. Evelyn often insisted on these private moments, claiming she was meditating or brainstorming some design concept. I was too tired to question it. "All right," I said, my voice almost deadpan. "I'll be in my office if you need me." She mumbled a brief acknowledgement. In my office, I collapsed into my chair. A dull ache flared in my lower back. Sitting too long at work was taking its toll. Lately, I'd been thinking I needed a change, a new challenge, or at least a break. But we had a mortgage and obligations, so I stayed on the treadmill like a good soldier. I took out my phone, planning to check a few last messages, when I noticed her bag on the floor by my desk. Evelyn's purse was rarely left outside our bedroom. Something about that made me uneasy. For a man who prided himself on controlling the variables in his life, that small detail felt like a piece of a puzzle suddenly out of place. I reached down to move it aside. And that's when I saw the small recorder. At first, I thought it was just one of those digital voice recorders she used to capture design ideas or client notes. But curiosity tugged harder than caution, and I pressed play. What followed was a minute of muffled shuffling, then voices. Hers. A man's. The conversation was low, intimate, punctuated by a soft laugh that I didn't recognize. I don't know exactly how to describe the sensation that shot through my body at that moment, but it was similar to the feeling you get when you miss a stair step and your heart lurches. Except this time, there was no regaining balance. For a few seconds, I simply stopped breathing. I listened to her voice, my wife's voice, speaking words loaded with an affection she hadn't shown me in a long time. The man on the recording responded with a hushed tone that sent a ripple of hot anger through my veins. I couldn't make out every single word, but the meaning was there, bold as neon. They were lovers. She spoke about how she felt caged at home, how I was too distant, how our marriage was becoming a prison. Then a laugh, flirtatious, followed by rustling fabric. My hand clenched so hard around the recorder that my knuckles turned white. I snapped it off, though the damage was done. My breath came in shallow bursts, my heartbeat hammering in my ears. I stared at the bag as if it were a venomous snake. That was the moment I realized. The phone calls she took in hushed tones, the late client meetings, the new routine of morning workouts, none of it was mere coincidence. Part of me wanted to burst through the bedroom door, demand an explanation, hurl accusations as if I were cross-examining her. But I remembered my father's advice. A single misstep in anger can destroy everything. You can't unhear the truth, can't unsee evidence. So I didn't confront her then. Instead, I stood there, a trembling statue, feeling my insides quake with heartbreak, fury, and something else, an odd sense of guilt, as though I were the one who'd failed, who'd driven her away. The next few days were torture, yet I forced myself to maintain an outward calm. At breakfast, I'd ask about her schedule in a clipped, lawyer-like tone. She'd answer, glancing up with an odd look, as if suspecting I knew something. But my face gave away nothing. I carried the weight of that recorder everywhere, invisible but heavy, like a ball and chain around my neck. My mind replayed her words, "He's just a shadow. He doesn't even see me." The worst part was that I started believing I might deserve her contempt. I had been distant, hadn't I? Working insane hours, ignoring her longing for my time, burying myself in office crises. There was a swirling mix of sorrow and rage building inside me that I couldn't release. If I lashed out too soon, I might lose any advantage. And something in me, the wounded pride, the thirst for control, decided I wanted to handle this my way. She left the house early that Saturday, dressed in athletic wear, claiming she was headed to a Pilates studio. I stared at her toned figure as she walked out the door. If I were more naive, I might have admired her commitment to fitness. But now I suspected she was meeting someone else. Still, I said nothing. A small part of me still clung to the faint hope that I was wrong. That day, though, I followed her. I remember my hands trembling on the steering wheel as I drove half a block behind her car. She stopped at a neighborhood gym, nothing fancy, just a standard chain place. And out stepped a man I'd never seen, broad shoulders, easy grin, the kind of charismatic aura some fitness trainers exude. She greeted him with a hug that lasted too long to be professional. My stomach twisted. I parked in a spot where I could see them but remained unseen. Through the glass windows, I watched them move to the far corner of the gym's equipment area. At first, they did standard routines, squats, lunges, that sort of thing. But the way they spoke, the way they glanced at each other, it was as intimate as a whisper in a crowded room. She leaned in, said something close to his ear, and he smiled like he was devouring her. My jaw clenched so hard, I thought I might crack a tooth. I wanted to barge in, to tear the place apart, to confront him like a cornered defendant. But I sat there, heart pounding, nails digging into my palms, waiting. Waiting for what? Evidence? Justification? Or perhaps waiting for that part of me that still felt guilty to vanish. They went into a side room, a smaller, private training space. There was a window, but the blinds were half pulled. I saw silhouettes. His hands braced on her hips, her head tilting back. It wasn't just a trainer helping a client. That image, even half hidden by blinds, burned into my eyes like a brand. My ears roared with blood, my chest rose and fell with quick, ragged breaths. My marriage, my life, was being dismantled in broad daylight by two people who, apparently, didn't care if the world saw them. I felt like a ghost watching my own funeral. I drove home in a haze, my vision blurred by tears of rage. I'm not a man prone to crying. But that day I felt something hot and wet slip down my cheek. My phone buzzed. Messages from coworkers, probably, but I ignored it. The real question was, what do I do now? Do I confront Evelyn? Do I call her out in a blaze of fury? Part of me wanted that quick fix. The yelling, the breakage, the catharsis of telling her exactly how she betrayed me. But a quieter, more calculating part of me said no. Be cold. Be methodical. Watch her unravel. Wait for the right moment. So I began a slow game of psychological chess, using my marketing strategist's brain for something far darker than I ever intended. When she returned that afternoon, her hair slightly damp, cheeks flushed from either exertion or guilt, she barely met my gaze. She said she felt tired and headed straight to take a shower. I watched her pass, felt the distance between us like a chasm. Despite my fury, guilt gnawed at me too. Had I pushed her to this? Had my absence, my obsession with career goals, made her search for affection elsewhere? In that moment, it didn't matter. I wanted her to feel an uncertainty that matched mine. So I forced a neutral expression and nodded, letting her vanish into the bathroom. Then I went to the kitchen, rummaged through drawers until I found the little voice recorder she thought I'd never notice. I placed it back in her purse, exactly as I found it. Let her wonder if she'd left it somewhere else. Let her fear or suspect that secrets can slip out. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and I intended to water them carefully. Over the following weeks, I dropped subtle hints. I'd ask about her workouts with an indifferent tone, studying her reaction. She'd tense up slightly, then cover it with a bright smile. I started buying groceries she liked, leaving them on the counter with a note about how I remembered she loved certain items, an attempt to seem caring, guilt-laden. She softened a bit at that, probably thinking I was oblivious to her betrayal. Meanwhile, I set up a small camera in the living room, disguised among our decorative pieces, so I could record the times when I wasn't at home. It felt twisted, but it was the only way I could feed the roiling hunger in my chest for more information. I needed to know how brazen she and her lover were. Sure enough, I caught them on video one weekday afternoon. He was there, in my house with his casual swagger, wearing a tank top, showing off his sculpted arms. She led him into the living room, where they kissed like starved animals. The tension in my jaw turned into a near migraine. I watched them sink onto the couch. My couch, where we once cuddled, planned our future, talked about traveling the world. Now she was arching against him, a low moan escaping her lips that I'd rarely heard from her in years. It was a harsh, unfiltered glimpse of the marriage I'd lost. An erotic subtext I never asked to witness, but it hammered home the final blow. She'd moved on, right under my nose, with a man I had never met. I wanted to destroy him. I wanted to tear him limb from limb. But a quiet, unwavering voice in my head told me not to be rash. Act like you do at the office, it said. Gather every detail, build an airtight case, then strike. Over the next few days, I compiled everything. The videos, the audio recordings, texts I'd found on her phone when she left it unlocked for a moment. It was insane how many incriminating messages they'd exchanged, some more explicit than anything I'd ever said to her. Did she crave that kind of raw desire, that rush of being wanted? We all desire that, I supposed. But the venomous part of my mind whispered that she had done it to humiliate me. I would not let her see me broken, no matter how much it hurt. My father had taught me better. Never show weakness to those who would exploit it. Every night, after she fell asleep, I scrolled through the evidence, my heart flipping between agony and cold rage. The guilt still lingered that I'd somehow driven her into the arms of another man. Yet each moan she gave him on that recording, each whisper of "I can't wait to see you again," cut deeper. In those dark moments, I caught myself trembling, biting the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. This marriage, I realized, had long been teetering on the edge. She just had the nerve to jump first. Then came the night she forgot her phone downstairs. It buzzed around midnight. I was still awake. Sleep had become impossible, so I checked the screen. His name lit up. Jason. I felt my nostrils flare. Their text conversation was open, with lines like, "Can't wait to feel your body again," and "He's clueless." The last message was something that made my hand shake as I read it. If he ever finds out, it's over. But we're too smart for that. In that moment, my jaw set, and a grim determination locked in place. They thought I was an idiot. They thought I was blind. Fine. I'd show them just how clueless I was. The next morning, I waited in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in my hands. She came down, sleepy-eyed, hair unbrushed, wearing that silk robe I'd once found irresistible. I couldn't bear to look at her the same way now. I kept my voice controlled. "I made coffee," I said, offering a polite smile. She seemed surprised. "Thanks," she mumbled, still half asleep. I gestured for her to sit. She did, glancing nervously at me. I could almost hear her thoughts. Why is he being so nice? Is something off? I smiled again, an expression that felt entirely alien on my face. "So," I began, in a tone I'd use in a deposition, "how was your workout session yesterday?" She blinked, suspicion flaring in her eyes. "It was fine," she said carefully. "Just the usual routine." I watched her, letting a tense silence hang. Then I shrugged as if it were nothing. "Good," I said. "Good." She stared at me for a moment, then turned away, taking the sip of coffee. We both knew there was a conversation unspoken in the air, but neither of us was ready to crack. I gave her that moment of reprieve, partly because I wanted her anxiety to grow, partly because a twisted part of me still longed for her to see what she was doing, to show remorse. But she said nothing. After a few awkward minutes, she excused herself and went upstairs. I exhaled shakily, my heart pounding. The plan was in motion, though I still wasn't entirely sure how it would end. A few days later, I meticulously staged the living room as if it were set for a small gathering. Candles, soft music, a platter of cheese and crackers. I even poured 2 glasses of wine. Then I called her. My voice was steady, direct. I need you home by 7. Important news. She sounded concerned, but she agreed. By 6:30, I positioned the hidden camera just right, ensuring it captured the entire couch area. At 6:59, I heard her car pull into the driveway. My pulse hammered so loud, I thought I might pass out, but I forced a calm expression as she walked in. She saw the candles, the wine. Her eyes flickered with confusion and a hint of apprehension. "What's this about?" she asked, trying to sound casual. I motioned for her to sit. She did, perched on the edge of the couch. I stayed standing, arms folded as though addressing a jury. "I want to talk about us," I said. She swallowed, her face momentarily pale. "Sure," she replied, fidgeting with the edge of her blouse. The tension was thick enough to slice with a knife. I began. "I know you've been unhappy. I know I've been working too much. And maybe you felt you had nowhere else to turn." Her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't speak. "So," I went on, "I want to ask, do you think we still have something worth saving?" The question hung in the air. She looked down, her lips pressed into a tight line. "I don't know," she finally said, her voice trembling. "Things haven't been right for a while." Her ambivalence stung, but I pressed forward. "Is there someone else?" I asked, my tone crisp, measured. She froze. For a moment, I saw pure fear in her eyes. Then she shook her head, not strongly, but enough to lie. "No," she said, almost in a whisper. The silence that followed was crushing. I stared at her, and she held my gaze with that defiance she'd always had, the defiance I once admired. In that instant, something in me snapped. "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice dropping an octave. She flinched. But instead of yelling, I moved to the stereo on the shelf. I pressed play on a track I prepared. It was the audio from her hidden recorder, the short snippet where she and Jason whispered about my irrelevance. My hand shook as the sound of her voice filled the room, but I refused to show any outward weakness. She shot up from the couch, eyes darting like a trapped animal. "What the hell?" she stammered. Her face went pale, then flushed red. "Where did you get that?" I paused the recording after a few seconds, letting the tension build. "You left this behind," I said quietly, like evidence at a crime scene. I studied her expression, which flickered between fear, shock, and then anger. "You had no right," she began, but I cut her off. "Stop." My tone was calm, final. "You want to talk about rights. How about the right to know your wife has been sleeping with another man?" My words echoed, the finality of them slamming into the room like a judge delivering a verdict. She looked at me as if seeing a stranger. "James." Her voice shook. "It just happened." I raised my hand for silence. "Don't spin me a story," I said. "I'm not interested in hearing how accidental it was. I've seen the videos, heard the audio. You planned this, Evelyn. You brought him into our house." Her eyes brimmed with tears, and for a second, I felt that surge of guilt again, that pang of sorrow. But I hardened my resolve. She had to face what she'd done. She tried to speak, but all that came out was a choked sob. Then, almost instantly, her tears were replaced by a spark of indignation. We drifted apart. She snapped, voice laced with anger. You barely even looked at me anymore. You treated me like I was part of the furniture, something to come home to at the end of your day, nothing more. I stared at her, forcing my expression to remain impassive. So you decided sleeping with another man was the solution? I asked, each word clipped. She lifted her chin defiantly. I needed to feel alive, she said. He gave me what you couldn't. My heart stung at that, but I refused to let her see how deeply it cut. Instead, I just nodded as if I were taking notes. Is he giving you everything you need now? I asked. The question was blunt, almost savage. She glared at me, tears threatening again. That's not fair, she whispered. Life isn't fair, I replied, turning away to hide the tremble in my lips. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my composure. This isn't about fairness. It's about what happens next. She stood, crossing her arms over her chest in a defensive posture. So what do you want, James? A divorce. Is that it? Her voice wavered, betraying her fear. I turned back, meeting her gaze. I want the truth, I said. I want you to admit what you did, and then I want you to see the consequences. Her jaw tightened. Fine, she spat. I slept with him. Many times. Yes. Are you happy now? Her voice cracked on the last syllable, sending a jolt of pain through me. But I kept my stance rigid. I'm not happy, I replied. Not at all. But I know what I'm dealing with. She opened her mouth to retort, but I raised my hand again. We're not finished, I said softly. I want you to invite him over tomorrow. Tell him I'm gone. Tell him the house is free. Whatever you need to do. I want him here. Her eyes widened. What? You've lost your mind. I stared at her coldly. Maybe I have. But you'll do it, or I'll send every piece of evidence I have to your firm, your mother, the people you respect most. Trust me, Evelyn, you don't want that. She looked at me in disbelief. Why? What's the point? What are you planning? Her tone was panicked, and for a brief moment, pity flickered through me. This was the woman I once loved, now standing there terrified because of me. But the anger, the betrayal overshadowed any compassion. Call him, I repeated. Do it, or your life becomes very public, very messy. She swallowed hard, tears slipping down her cheeks. Then she gave a small nod, turned on her heel, and left the room, slamming the door behind her. I stood alone in the candlelit living room, the once romantic setting now feeling like a twisted stage. My throat ached, my hands shook. The guilt flared up, but I smothered it. She'd made her choice. Now I was making mine. The next day crawled by in slow motion. I took the day off from work under the pretense of having a personal emergency, which wasn't far from the truth. Evelyn told me Jason would be coming at 3 in the afternoon. She left the house around noon, apparently unable to bear my presence. Fine by me. I sat in my car parked down the street, waiting, feeling like a detective on a stakeout. Around 2:45, a sleek, dark sedan pulled up. Out stepped Jason, every inch the confident fitness trainer I'd seen at the gym. He walked to the front door, pressed the bell. No answer. He pulled out his phone, presumably calling her. Moments later, she answered, letting him in. My pulse thumped. This was it. I waited a few agonizing minutes, forcing myself to remain steady, then approached my own house. The front door was unlocked. I stepped inside, hearing them in the living room. The scenario felt too surreal. But I moved forward, each step resonating with grim finality. As I turned the corner, I saw them. She was standing by the couch, looking anxious, arms folded. He stood next to her, close enough that I wanted to rip his arms off. They both looked at me with wide eyes. My voice came out cold, measured. You must be Jason. He looked between me and Evelyn, confusion morphing into a cocky grin. Guess the cat's out of the bag, he said, trying to play it cool. But I saw the flicker of nerves. I nodded once, stepping into the living room like I owned the place, because I did. We can skip the niceties, I said. I know everything. I just want you to understand exactly what you've been messing with. He gave a half-laugh, feigning bravado. Man, if you want to fight, we can take it outside. Evelyn looked panicked. Jason, shut up, she hissed. I kept my gaze locked on him. We're not going outside. I said, we're having this conversation here. He glanced at her, then back at me. Fine. Say what you need to say. I moved to the couch, sat down calmly, and motioned for him to sit too. He didn't. Fair enough, I said quietly. I turned to Evelyn. Tell him, I ordered. She stared at me, tears forming again. James, please. Tell him. I repeated, my tone sharper. She swallowed. Jason, he knows everything. He has recordings, videos. She choked on the words, humiliated. I felt a wave of bitterness, but I kept my mask of calm. She's given me more than enough to ruin both of you if I feel like it, I said. Jason's face twisted. Is this blackmail? What do you want from me? He took a step closer, muscles tensing as if he might strike. I stood up slowly, matching his intensity. I want you to realize, I said evenly, that this wasn't just a fling. You came into my marriage, my home, with zero respect. He scoffed, crossing his arms. You weren't giving her what she needed, he said. Maybe if you had, she wouldn't be with me. That blow landed squarely. But I refused to flinch. Save it, I snapped. I'm not here for your relationship advice. I'm here to deliver consequences. My voice shook slightly at the end, but I pressed on. I have enough to make sure you lose your clients, your reputation, maybe even face legal ramifications if I spin it right. I doubt you included sleeping with clients in their own living rooms on your professional profile. How many lines of ethical conduct do you think that breaks? A flicker of uncertainty passed over his face. Good. I could sense Evelyn trembling beside him, not sure where to stand or how to intervene. So, what do you want? He asked again, his earlier arrogance wavering. My heart hammered. I was on the precipice of something dark. I wanted to see him squirm. I wanted to see her regret. Yet I also just wanted this nightmare to end. For now, I said slowly, I want you out of my house, and I want you to never contact my wife again. I turned to her. Evelyn, you are free to do as you please, but I'll make it known. If you keep seeing him, I will destroy everything in your shared path. I'm done being the clueless husband. Silence coiled in the room. Jason clenched his jaw, staring at me like he wanted to rip my head off, but wasn't sure if he should. Eventually, he scoffed. Fine, he muttered, turning to her. I guess this is goodbye then. She looked at him, tears glistening, but said nothing. He stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture on the wall rattled. The echo of that slam felt like the final chord in a twisted symphony of betrayal. Evelyn stood there, hugging herself. What happens now? She asked in a small voice. I looked at her, every ounce of me raging, hurting, wanting answers. That depends, I said, on whether you're willing to admit you destroyed us, or if you plan on blaming me forever. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. I can't do this, she whispered. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I let out a bitter laugh. You did exactly what you wanted, Evelyn. Now you face the consequences. She stepped closer, hesitant, arms out as though wanting to touch me, to calm the tension. I stepped back. My voice cracked when I spoke. You wanted freedom. You got it. I inhaled sharply, trying to steady the quiver in my chest. I'm going to pack a bag and leave for a while. Don't bother calling me. Then I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. If you have any respect left for me, or for yourself, you'll figure out what you want before I come back. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. I turned and headed upstairs, my steps echoing in the silence. In the bedroom, I grabbed a duffel bag, stuffing clothes inside, my hand shaking so badly that I could barely zip it up. Part of me wanted to collapse on the bed and weep. Another part of me wanted to keep going, to push the pain away until it was a dull ache in the background. I walked back down, half expecting her to try and stop me. But she was still standing in the living room, staring at the front door, lost in her own mess. Without a word, I walked out. Outside, the sun was painfully bright. I tossed the bag into the trunk of my car, climbed in, and just sat there. My mind churned with guilt, relief, heartbreak, anger. What had I done? What had I become? I stared at the house for a long moment, the home we once built together, now just a structure of lies and regrets. Then, with a low growl in my throat, I started the engine and drove off, heading nowhere in particular. The next few days were a blur. I stayed in a cheap motel near the freeway, the kind where the AC rattles and the walls smell of stale cigarettes. My nights were spent pacing the room, waiting for the heaviness in my chest to subside. Part of me expected to feel triumphant. After all, I had forced a confrontation, thrown Jason out, made my stance clear, but no sense of victory came. Instead, I was haunted by the loop of images and sounds, her laughter with him, the silhouette in the gym, the desperate tears when I cornered her. I felt hollow, and there was a gnawing question I couldn't shake. Had I just burned down every bridge? Could we salvage anything? On the third day, I checked my phone. Missed calls from her, texts I hadn't read. They piled up like debris from a storm. I finally opened them. Some were frantic. "James, please talk to me." Others were angry. "You can't just run away." One was heartbreakingly simple. "I'm sorry. Please let me explain." I stared at that last one for a long time, my chest tightening. What was left to explain? I considered ignoring them all. But something in me, the part that loved her, the part that felt guilty for failing her, made me press the call button. She answered on the first ring, her voice trembling. "James, where are you? Are you safe?" I bit back a harsh remark. "I'm fine," I said flatly. "I just needed time to think." She was silent, probably trying to gauge my mood. Then she let out a shuddering breath. "I understand," she whispered. "Could you come home? I need to see you." I closed my eyes, the word home echoing bitterly. "Are you alone?" I asked, my voice cold. She exhaled. "Yes, I swear. He hasn't been back. I haven't seen him." I cut him off. I leaned against the motel wall, uncertain. Why should I believe that? I asked. "You lied before." She choked on a sob. "I know," she managed. "I'm sorry. I'll do anything to prove it. Just give me a chance." My heart twisted, torn between the desire to hang up and the ache to see her face again, to see if she really meant it. Against my own instincts, I found myself saying, "Fine. I'll come by later." When I returned, the house looked the same as ever, except now it felt like walking into a crime scene after the body's been removed. She stood in the entryway, wringing her hands. The moment she saw me, she rushed forward, tears in her eyes. I lifted a hand, halting her. "Don't," I said, my voice wavering. "No hugging. Not yet." She nodded, shoulders slumped. "Let's talk," I continued, heading to the living room. She followed, sitting on the edge of the couch as I remained standing. "What do you want to say?" I asked, arms crossed defensively. She stared at me, tears threatening to spill. "I don't have an excuse," she began. "I can't justify what I did. I just, somewhere along the line, I felt like you were slipping away. And I was too weak, or too selfish, or too angry to try and fix it the right way. Then Jason came along, gave me attention, and her words faltered. "I made the worst mistake of my life." I let her speak, fighting the urge to interrupt. "I know I hurt you," she said. "I can see it in your eyes. And I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I'm asking you to let me try to make this right. Even if you hate me now. Even if you never trust me again. I need you to know I'm sorry. Truly. I studied her face. She looked broken, scared, like someone who realized far too late the cost of her actions. Part of me wanted to comfort her. Another part wanted to keep punishing her for the betrayal. I don't know what to do, I finally said, my voice cracking. You shattered the foundation of this marriage. Everything we had. I don't know if we can ever get it back. She bowed her head, tears dripping onto her lap. I'll do anything, she whispered. Counseling. A separation if you need time. Anything, as long as there's a chance we can heal. I can't lose you completely. Her desperation was palpable, and for a moment, I felt an echo of the love I once had for her. Slowly, I walked over, sat in the chair across from her. I can't promise I'll forgive you, I said. But I can promise that I'll at least try to see if there's anything left. A sob escaped her lips, and she nodded, wiping her eyes. Thank you, she breathed. We sat in silence for a while. The tension thick, but not as suffocating as before. Then I spoke again, my tone matter-of-fact, like a judge issuing a new order. We'll go to marriage counseling if we decide it's worth saving. In the meantime, no more lies. If I catch you once, just once, covering anything up, we're done. Understood? She nodded, tears still glistening. Yes, she whispered. Rising from the chair, I looked around the living room. Our photos, our furniture. My mind flickered with memories of better times. I'm going to stay in the guest room, I said. I need space. She didn't protest. She just nodded, her expression full of regret. Then, as I turned to leave, she called my name softly. James. I paused, not turning around. I know this probably means nothing right now, she said, her voice trembling. But I do love you. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I thought we were in this together, I replied. Maybe we still can be. I just don't know yet. Then I walked away, leaving her with her tears and me with mine. That night, alone in the guest room, I lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The thirst for revenge that once fueled me had subsided. In its place was a hollow sense of exhaustion, a sense that maybe the real battle had just begun. One to see if we could rebuild, or if everything was doomed. Part of me still felt shame, like I wasn't man enough to keep her interest. Part of me hated her for seeking what I failed to give. Another part understood that life isn't always black and white. All of me knew that things would never be the same. But I also realized, in a strange way, I was stronger. The naive part of me that believed wholeheartedly in a perfect, unbreakable marriage was gone. In its place stood a man who had faced betrayal and survived. I wasn't sure what future lay ahead, but I knew I had the power to walk away if needed, and that knowledge gave me a sense of control I'd lost long ago. In the morning, I woke early to the faint sound of her crying somewhere in the house. My first instinct was to go to her, to comfort her, but I held back. We had a lot of work to do, if we were going to do it at all. I splashed water on my face, looked at my reflection, and recognized a person who'd been shredded by pain, but refused to be destroyed. Maybe that was the lesson. Sometimes, you have to be broken to find the steel in your core. I left the room and found her in the kitchen, staring blankly out the window. She turned when she heard me, eyes swollen, lips trembling. "Good morning," she whispered, voice raw. I nodded, grabbed a mug, poured myself coffee. "Morning," I replied evenly. The tension was still there, but so was a sense that something had shifted, as if the storm had raged through and now left wreckage we could either abandon or try to salvage. We stood there in silence for a long time, both of us unsure of what came next. At last, I set my coffee down. "We should figure out a schedule for counseling," I said. She exhaled, relief crossing her face, and nodded. "Yes, absolutely. I'll make an appointment." Our eyes met, and for an instant, I saw the woman I fell in love with, a flicker of hope in her gaze. I wasn't ready to reciprocate that hope, but I didn't dismiss it entirely. I simply turned away, leaning against the counter, letting the hot coffee soothe my hands. My heart still beat with anger, but it was tempered now, directed, not blind. Outside, a new day was beginning. Cars passed by. Neighbors walked dogs. The world kept spinning. In here, our little realm of heartbreak and regret, we stood on a knife's edge between ruin and rebuilding. I thought about Jason, about how he was no longer a factor. His presence had been exorcised from our home. But the scars he'd left, the betrayal Evelyn and I had lived, they'd remain. Maybe we'd learn to live with them. Maybe we wouldn't. At that moment, all I knew was that the man who discovered his wife's infidelity was not the same man who stood in the kitchen that morning. He was harder, but also strangely freer, broken in ways, but stronger in others. With a deep breath, I walked into the living room, taking in the space where so many battles had been fought, silent ones, unspoken resentments, culminating in that final confrontation. I closed my eyes, letting the memory of it roll through me like a wave. When I opened them again, I felt my posture straighten, felt the slightest hint of determination surge in my veins. I had survived her betrayal. I had faced the worst pain of my life, and was still here. Whatever came next, I'd endure. And maybe, in time, I'd heal. Because I realized I owed that to myself, the chance to be whole again. I heard her footsteps approach. She stood behind me, hesitant. I didn't turn around. I just listened to her breathing, felt the heaviness of her guilt, her shame, her regret. Then I spoke, softly but firmly. If we're going to do this, we do it with total honesty. No more secrets. She nodded. I heard the soft rustle of her hair. I promise, she whispered, voice nearly breaking. I let the promise hang there, uncertain but hopeful. Somewhere outside, the sun crept higher in the sky, lighting the next chapter of our complicated lives. And so I stood, on the edge of heartbreak and redemption, determined not to let either define me completely. I had faced betrayal, orchestrated a harsh reckoning, and survived the emotional inferno. That alone gave me a sense of grim satisfaction. I wasn't the same man who once believed illusions of perfect love. But maybe, just maybe, I was a man who could forge something real out of the ashes. And that, I realized, was worth trying.